Deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, there was a bunker that most people did not know existed. It had been built during the Cold War, designed to survive nuclear fire. Now it served a different purpose. Now it held the most important meeting in human history. The leaders arrived in secret, presidents and prime ministers, kings and generals. They came from countries that had been enemies for generations. They came from nations that had fought wars against each other only years before. They walked through the same doors, sat at the same table, and looked at each other with eyes that held no hatred. There was no time for hatred anymore. President Elena Vasquez of the United States sat across from President Chen Wei of China. Their countries had spent decades preparing for war against each other. Now that seemed like a silly game played by children who did not understand what real danger looked like. "We have 30 days, Elena said. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook slightly. 30 days before they come to kill us all. Every man, every woman, every child, every animal and plant and microbe on this planet. We have 30 days to find a way to survive." Chen Wei nodded slowly. "My scientists have been studying the message. The technology required to send such a broadcast to every device on Earth simultaneously. It is beyond anything we have ever imagined. These beings are thousands of years ahead of us, maybe millions. Then we cannot beat them with technology," said Prime Minister Okonkwo of Nigeria. He was an old man with white hair and tired eyes, but his voice carried the strength of someone who had survived many impossible situations. "Not in 30 days, not in 30 years. If we fight them on their terms, we lose." "Then we do not fight on their terms," said a new voice. Everyone turned. A young woman had entered the room. She was Japanese, with short black hair and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She carried a folder stuffed with papers and looked terrified to be standing before the most powerful people on Earth. "Who are you?" President Vasquez asked. "My name is Yuki Tanaka. I am a physicist. I work on theoretical propulsion systems at the Tokyo Institute of Technology." She swallowed hard. "I have been studying the alien signals for years, not officially, just on my own, because I was curious." General Morrison of the United Kingdom frowned. "Young lady, this is not the time for—" "I know how their ships move," Yuki interrupted. Her voice was still shaking, but something fierce burned in her eyes. "They fold space. They take 2 points that are far apart and bring them together, like folding a piece of paper. It is elegant. It is beautiful. It is also very, very safe." She opened her folder and spread papers across the table. The leaders leaned forward, looking at equations they did not understand. "Safe?" Chen Wei asked. "Why does safety matter?" "Because safe means slow," Yuki said. "Safe means careful. Safe means they treat space like a garden, something to be respected and preserved." She pointed at one of her diagrams. "But there is another way. A way that is not safe. A way that is fast and violent and dangerous. A way that tears space instead of folding it." "And you think we can do this?" President Vasquez asked. "Why, UK?" I met her eyes. "I think we have 30 days and nothing to lose. I think that makes us capable of things that safe, careful species would never attempt." The room fell silent. Then, slowly, Chen Wei began to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had just realized that the universe was stranger and more terrible than he had ever imagined. "She is right," he said. "They expect us to beg. They expect us to fight each other while we wait to die. They do not expect us to work together. They do not expect us to try the impossible." President Vasquez stood up. She looked around the table, at leaders who had been enemies, at generals who had planned wars against each other, at rulers of nations that had spent centuries in conflict. From this moment forward, she said, "There are no more nations. There was only Earth. There was only humanity. Every resource, every factory, every scientist, every soldier, they all belonged to the same cause now. We survive together or we die together. There is no other option. One by one, the leaders nodded outside the bunker. The world began to change in factories across every continent. Assembly lines that had been building cars and phones and televisions were converted to new purposes. Engineers who had never met before worked side by side, sharing secrets that had been classified for decades. Languages that had seemed impossible to bridge were crossed with patience and determination, and translation software that worked better every day. In Russia, the last nuclear missiles were removed from their silos, not to be destroyed, but to be repurposed. The same technology that had been designed to end civilization would now be used to save it. In China, underground facilities that had been hidden from the world were open to international teams. Scientists from Europe and Africa and South America walked through doors that no foreigner had ever passed. In the United States, military bases became research centers. Generals who had spent their careers preparing for war now coordinated the largest engineering project in human history. And everywhere, ordinary people did extraordinary things. A retired mechanic in Brazil worked 20-hour days, his old hands steady as he assembled components he barely understood. A teacher in India kept her students calm, turning the end of the world into a lesson about courage and hope. A doctor in Germany treated patients who had collapsed from exhaustion, then went back to his own station and kept working. No one had to force them. No one had to threaten them. They simply understood, in a way that words could not express, that this was the moment their entire species had been building toward. This was what all of human history had been preparing them for. The aliens watched from their ships beyond the moon. They saw the power signatures changing. They saw the unusual movements. They noted it all in their reports and sent it back to the conclave with a single assessment. The humans were engaged in futile activity that would not change the outcome. They did not understand what they were seeing. They could not understand what they were seeing because no species in the history of the galaxy had ever done what humanity was about to do. No species had ever looked at extinction and responded. Not with despair, not with acceptance, but with the cold determination to make the universe pay for every single life it tried to take. On the 15th day, Yuki Tanaka stood before a group of the world's greatest physicists. Her equations covered every wall. Her voice was hoarse from endless explanations. "It will work," she said. "I cannot promise we will survive. I cannot promise anything. But I can tell you this. If we light this fire, the galaxy will see it burning, and they will remember us forever." The scientists looked at her. They looked at each other. They thought about their families, their homes, their dreams that would never come true. Then they got back to work. Humanity had 15 days left. They were not finished yet. The station floated in the darkness between stars. It was old, older than most civilizations that now sent their representatives to walk its crystal halls. The beings who built it had died long ago, but their creation remained. They called it Axiom Prime, and it served as the meeting place for the Galactic Conclave. 4,000 species had earned the right to sit in the Great Chamber. 4,000 flags hung from the ceiling, each one representing a world that had learned to travel between stars. Some of these species had been part of the conclave for millions of years. Others had joined only centuries ago. But all of them agreed on one thing. The galaxy needed order, and order required difficult decisions. Today, they would make such a decision about Earth. Ambassador Keth Vaughan stood at the center of the chamber. His body was tall and thin, covered in silver scales that caught the light when he moved. He had served the Silurian hegemony for 300 years, and in that time, he had overseen the judgment of 11 species. None of those judgments had been pleasant. All of them had been necessary. He raised one long arm, and the chamber fell silent. "Fellow representatives," he began, his voice carrying through translation devices to every ear and mind in the room. "We gather today to discuss the species known as humanity. They live on a small planet in an unremarkable star system. They have not yet developed faster than light travel. By our standards, they are children." He paused, letting his words settle. "But they are dangerous children." A holographic display appeared above him, showing Earth as it spun slowly in space. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. It looked peaceful from this distance. It looked beautiful. "We have watched them for 300 of their years," Kethvorin continued. "In that time, they have fought 2 global wars. They have created weapons capable of destroying their own world. They have burned their forests, poisoned their waters, and driven countless of their fellow creatures to extinction." The display changed, showing images of mushroom clouds rising over cities, soldiers marching across broken landscapes, children crying in the ruins of their homes. "This is their nature," the ambassador said. "They are aggressive beyond reason. They fight over resources they do not need. They kill over ideas they cannot prove. They are, by every measure we use, a threat to galactic peace." A murmur ran through the chamber. Representatives shifted in their seats. Some nodded in agreement. Others watched with expressions that were harder to read. "Our projections show that humans will develop faster than light travel within 200 years, Kethvorin said. "When they do, they will spread across the stars like a disease. They will bring their wars with them. They will bring their hatred. They will bring their endless hunger for more." He turned slowly, looking at the assembled representatives. "We have seen this before. We know how it ends. The only question is whether we act now, while we still can, or whether we wait until they have grown too strong to stop." The vote took less than an hour. Species after species cast their decision into the great machine at the center of the chamber. When it was done, the result appeared on every screen dot in favor of termination, 3,847. Abstaining, 12. Opposed, 0. Kethvorin felt no pleasure at the result. He never did, but he felt the cold comfort of necessity. The garden of galactic civilization could not grow if weeds were allowed to spread. Sometimes, the gardener had to pull them out by the root. The message was composed with care. It was translated into every human language. It was sent on every frequency, to every device capable of receiving it. On Earth, televisions flickered to life. Phones buzzed. Radios crackled. And everywhere, humans stopped what they were doing to listen. By unanimous decree of the Galactic Conclave, the species designated as humanity has been judged incompatible with cosmic civilization. The planet Earth shall be sterilized in 30 standard rotations. This is not a punishment. This is not revenge. This is simply the recognition that some species cannot exist alongside others. Resistance is acknowledged as part of your nature. It will not change the outcome. The message ended. Silence followed Dot in the observation center above Axiom Prime. Kethvorin watched the feeds from Earth. He had done this many times before. He knew what came next. First, there would be denial. Then anger. Then desperate attempts to negotiate. Then panic. Then collapse. The pattern was always the same. He watched the screens showing major cities. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow. He waited for the riots to begin. He waited for the governments to fall. He waited for humanity to tear itself apart, as all condemned species eventually did. But something strange happened. The cities did not burn. The governments did not fall. Instead, one by one, the lights began to go out. Not the emergency lights, not the signs of collapse. The broadcast towers, the communication satellites, the endless electronic noise that humans constantly pumped into space. Earth was going silent. Kethvorin leaned forward, his scales flickering with confusion. His assistant, a young Silurian named Dex, approached with a data tablet. "Ambassador, we are detecting unusual activity on the planet's surface." "What kind of activity?" "We are not certain. Power signatures are changing. Military forces are moving, but not toward each other. Civilian populations are relocating to. We do not know where. They are moving underground." Kethvorin stared at the screens. The observation drone showed highways packed with cars, all moving in the same direction. Factories that had been idle were coming back to life. Aircraft filled the skies, but they were not fighting. They were transporting something. "This is not normal," Dex said quietly. "This is not how condemned species behave." Kethvorin said nothing. He had seen 11 species face this moment. All of them had begged. All of them had broken. All of them had spent their final days in chaos and despair. Humanity was not begging. Humanity was not breaking. Humanity was doing something else entirely. On the surface of Earth, a woman named Maria Santos stood outside her home in Snow Hollow. She was 42 years old, a teacher, a mother of 3. She had heard the message like everyone else. She had felt the fear, the despair, the crushing weight of knowing that everything she loved was about to end. Then she had felt something else. Her neighbor, a man she had argued with for years over a property line, walked over to her. He did not speak. He simply held out his hand. She took it. They stood together in silence, looking up at the stars that had just declared their death. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Old enemies embraced. Ancient grudges were forgotten. Borders that had divided nations for centuries became meaningless lines on maps that no longer mattered. The galaxy had given humanity 30 days to die. They had no intention of wasting them on fear. The Armada arrived on the 20th day. 12,000 ships emerged from folded space like sharks rising from dark water. They came from 40 different species, each one ancient and powerful beyond human understanding. The smallest of their vessels was larger than any aircraft carrier ever built on Earth. The largest was the size of a small moon, a city of metal and light that blocked out the stars. Admiral Vareth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Divine Certainty. He was a creature of war, born and bred for exactly this purpose. His species, the Krethana, had served as the military arm of the Conclave for 2 million years. In all that time, they had never lost a battle. They had never faced an enemy they could not crush. He looked at the blue planet hanging in the darkness below him and felt nothing but cold efficiency. This was routine. This was normal. In a few days, Earth would be clean and empty, and the galaxy would be a little bit safer. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. They wish to speak with you." Vareth considered refusing. There was nothing these creatures could say that would change anything. But the Conclave had traditions about these things. The condemned were always given a chance to speak their final words. "Put it through," he said. The screen flickered to life. A human female appeared, middle-aged, with dark hair streaked with gray. She wore simple clothing and stood in what appeared to be a plain room. There was nothing impressive about her appearance. She looked tired, like someone who had not slept in many days. "I am Secretary General Amara Osei of the United Nations," she said. Her voice was steady, without fear or anger. "I speak for all of humanity." Vareth studied her. She was small, fragile, easily broken. Her species had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. They were soft creatures, designed for a peaceful world that they had turned into a battlefield. "Speak then," he said. Though I should tell you that nothing you say will change your fate. Amara Asane nodded slowly. I know. I did not contact you to beg for mercy. I contacted you to tell you something important. Something you need to understand before what happens next. Varth felt a flicker of curiosity despite himself. And what is that? You have judged us by our worst moments, Amara said. By our wars and our hatreds and our endless capacity for destruction. You watched us fight each other for 300 years, and you concluded that we were a disease that needed to be cut out of the galaxy. She paused, and something changed in her expression. It was not anger. It was something deeper, something that Varth could not quite identify. You were not wrong about what we are, she continued. We are violent. We are aggressive. We are everything your reports say we are. But you made a mistake. A very serious mistake. And what mistake was that? Varth asked, though he did not really care about the answer. You assumed that our divisions were permanent. You assumed that we would tear ourselves apart when faced with death, the way other species have done. You looked at our history and saw only the conflicts, only the blood, only the endless cycle of war and peace and war again. Amara leaned forward, and now Varth could see the fire burning behind her tired eyes. But you forgot something important about predators, Admiral. When two predators fight each other, it is brutal and destructive. But when predators face a common enemy, she smiled, and there was nothing soft about it. They become a pack. Varth felt something strange. It took him a moment to identify the sensation. He had not experienced it in centuries, thought it was uncertainty. You have given us something we have never had before, Amara continued. A target that is not ourselves. An enemy that threatens every human being equally, regardless of their nation or their beliefs or the color of their skin. For the first time in our history, we are truly united. Not because we chose to be, but because you forced us to be. She straightened up, and her voice grew stronger. I want you to remember this moment, Admiral. I want you to remember that you were warned. Whatever happens next, whatever price we make you pay, know that you brought it upon yourselves. You could have left us alone. You could have waited and watched and given us a chance to prove ourselves. Instead, you chose to threaten our children. You chose to sentence our species to death. And now, she took a deep breath. Now you will learn what humans are capable of when we have nothing left to lose. The transmission ended. Varth stood in silence for a long moment. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. They had witnessed many final transmissions from condemned species. They had heard begging and screaming and curses and prayers. They had never heard anything like this. Admiral? His first officer asked carefully. What should we do? Varth shook off his momentary unease. The human had spoken well, but words were only words. They did not change the reality of 12,000 ships against a planet that had never built anything capable of leaving its own atmosphere. Continue as planned, he said. We begin sterilization in 10 days. He turned away from the screen, putting the strange transmission out of his mind. There was nothing to worry about. There was nothing these humans could do to threaten his fleet. They were brave, perhaps, and clever in their way. But bravery and cleverness would not save them from the fire that was coming, deep beneath the Earth's surface, in a facility that had been built in 15 days of desperate labor. Yuki Tanaka watched the same transmission on a small screen. She wiped tears from her eyes and turned to face the massive machine that filled the cavern around her. They called it the Prometheus Array. It was not elegant like alien technology. It was ugly and brutal, a thing of welded metal and burning plasma, and barely contained fury. It should not work. Every simulation said it should tear itself apart the moment they activated it. But Yuki had run the numbers 1,000 times. She had checked every calculation, tested every component, pushed every system to its limits. And she believed, with a faith that went beyond mathematics, that it would work. It had to work. Behind her, workers swarmed over the structure like ants, making final adjustments. They were engineers and scientists from every nation on Earth, working together with a coordination that would have been impossible 3 weeks ago. They did not argue about credit or patents or national pride. They simply worked, because working was all they could do. In 5 days. They would activate the array. In 5 days. They would tear open the sky, and the galaxy would learn that humanity did not know how to die quietly. The 28th day began like any other day in the fleet. Ships maintained their positions. Crews performed their duties. Admiral Vorath reviewed the sterilization protocols one final time, making sure every weapon was charged and every target was assigned. In 2 days, they would begin. In 2 days, the planet below would burn. Then the alarms started screaming. Admiral. His sensor officer's voice was sharp with confusion. We are detecting massive energy buildup on the planet's surface. The readings are... Admiral, this cannot be right. Morris strode to the sensor station and looked at the display. What he saw made no sense. The energy signatures were enormous, bigger than anything Earth should be capable of producing. They were concentrated in a single location, deep beneath one of the continental masses. What are they doing? He demanded. Unknown, Admiral. The energy pattern does not match any known technology. It is... The officer hesitated, checking his readings again. It appears to be some kind of spatial distortion field. But the configuration is wrong. It is unstable. Dangerously unstable. Vorath felt the first real stirring of concern. Unstable how? Before the officer could answer, the planet below them changed. There was no warning. One moment, space was normal. The next moment, it was not. A wound opened in reality itself, a tear in the fabric of existence that burned with colors that had no names. It stretched from the Earth's surface up into the void, a pillar of impossible light that made every sensor on every ship go mad. And through that wound came ships. They were not graceful like conclave vessels. They were not elegant or beautiful or refined. They looked like weapons, pure and simple. Angular hulls of dark metal. Gun batteries that jutted out like broken teeth. Engines that burned hot and angry, pushing them forward with reckless speed. There were hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Ships of every size, from fighters that were barely larger than a human to cruisers that could match the Conclave's destroyers. They poured through the wound in reality like water through a broken dam, spreading out in all directions. This is impossible, the sensor officer whispered. They did not have these ships 3 weeks ago. They did not have any ships 3 weeks ago. Where did they come from? Vorath did not answer. He was staring at the tactical display, watching the impossible fleet take formation around their dying planet. These ships were crude. They were ugly. By any reasonable standard, they should not work. But they worked. All ships, he said, his voice cold and steady. Battle stations? Weapons free. Destroy them. The Conclave fleet moved with the precision of 2 million years of experience. Ships turned and accelerated, weapons charging, shields activating. They had faced many enemies over the long millennia. They had crushed them all. The first wave of human ships charged straight at the fleet's center. It was suicide. It should have been suicide. The Conclave's weapons reached out, beams of energy that could cut through planets, missiles that could shatter moons. The human ships should have died in the first second. Instead, they flickered, shields activated around the crude vessels, energy barriers that held against weapons that should have destroyed them instantly. The shields were imperfect, flickering and failing and restarting constantly. But they held long enough for the human ships to close the distance, and then the humans fired back. They had no elegant weapons. They had no refined technology. They had missiles and bombs and nuclear warheads, the same crude tools they had spent decades threatening each other with. But they had learned something from the alien technology they had studied. They had learned how to make those crude weapons hurt. The first Conclave cruiser exploded in a ball of fire. Admiral Vorath felt something he had not experienced in centuries: shock. His ships were the finest in the galaxy. His crews were the best trained. And they were dying at the hands of creatures who had barely left their own atmosphere. "Focus fire on the lead vessels," he commanded. "Destroy them before they—" A human frigate, its hull already torn open and burning, suddenly accelerated. It was not trying to fight anymore. It was not trying to survive. It was aiming directly at a Conclave battleship. Engines pushed far beyond their safe limits. The battleship fired everything it had. Beams and missiles and energy weapons tore into the human vessel. It should have stopped. It should have died, but it kept coming. The frigate slammed into the battleship at impossible speed. Both ships vanished in a flash of light that temporarily blinded every sensor in the fleet. "They are insane," someone whispered on the bridge. "They are completely insane." But Vorath understood now. He understood what he was facing. These humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to make the Conclave bleed. They were fighting to prove that killing Earth would cost more than the galaxy was willing to pay. And they were succeeding. Hours passed. Ships died on both sides. The human fleet was smaller, weaker, less advanced. They should have been destroyed in the first minutes. Instead, they fought with a fury that defied all logic. When their weapons failed, they rammed. When their shields collapsed, they overloaded their reactors and took enemies with them. When their ships were crippled, crews donned primitive suits and fought in the vacuum itself, clinging to enemy hulls with magnetic boots and planting explosives by hand. On one of those ships, a captain named Marcus Chun stood on a bridge that was more fire than metal. Half his crew was dead. His ship was dying around him. But his weapons still worked, and his engines still burned. "Sir," his first officer said, blood streaming down her face, "we cannot survive another hit. We should retreat, and—" "No," Marcus said. He pointed at the tactical display, at the massive shape of Admiral Vorath's flagship. "We have one shot left in the main gun. One shot and enough fuel to reach them." He looked at his crew, at the men and women who had volunteered for a mission they knew would kill them. "Anyone who wants to leave, the escape pods still work. I will not order you to die with me." No one moved. "Then let us give them something to remember," Marcus said. He opened a channel to broadcast on all frequencies, so every ship in both fleets could hear him. Then he spoke one word, the same word that humans had been shouting since the battle began. "Remember." The ship lurched forward, its engines screaming, its hull breaking apart. The flagship's guns tried to stop it. They were too slow. Marcus Chun's ship hit the Divine Certainty's bridge at full speed, and both vessels died together. Admiral Vorath had time for one final thought before the fire took him. They were warned. The human warned them, and they did not listen. When the battle ended, the Conclave had lost 3,400 ships. The human fleet was gone, every vessel destroyed. 7 million souls who had known they would not survive. Earth still hung in space below, damaged but alive. The remaining Conclave ships pulled back. They had come to sterilize a planet. They had lost a third of their strength to creatures who had been building starships for less than a month. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake, and humanity had made them pay for it in blood. The Galactic Conclave had not experienced true shock in over 1,000,000 years. They had grown comfortable in their power, secure in their knowledge that nothing in the universe could truly threaten them. They had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. Now they remembered. The recordings played on. Every screen in the great chamber of Axiom Prime. 4,000 species watched in silence as their mighty fleet died at the hands of creatures they had dismissed as primitive. They watched ships that should not exist tear through vessels that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. They watched humans ram their burning craft into enemies rather than retreat. They watched 7 million beings choose death over surrender. Ambassador Keth Voran stood at his podium, but for the first time in 300 years, he could not speak. His scales had turned pale, a sign of deep distress among his species. He had voted for humanity's extinction. He had believed it was the right choice. Now he was not certain of anything. "This changes nothing," declared Representative Keth of the Vorn Dominion. His voice was loud and angry, covering fear with aggression. "They are still primitive. They are still contained on their single world. We send another fleet, a larger fleet, and we finish what we started." "With what ships?" asked a quiet voice from the back of the chamber. The speaker was small, ancient, a member of a species so old that no one remembered their name. "The fleet we sent was the largest we have assembled in 10,000 years. We lost a third of it to beings who built their first starship 3 weeks ago. Then we send everything," Teth insisted. "We gather every ship from every species and we lose half of that?" The ancient one interrupted. "Or more. The humans learn quickly. They adapt. They improve. How many ships will they build in the time it takes us to gather another armada? How much stronger will they be?" Silence fell over the chamber. No one wanted to answer that question. A new voice spoke up. Representative Kelsani of the Watching Eye, a species known for their wisdom and caution. "I propose we consider another path. The humans have proven themselves. They have paid a price that few species would pay. Perhaps," she hesitated, "perhaps they have earned the right to exist." "Earned the right?" Teth was furious. "They killed Admiral Vorath. They destroyed 3,000 of our ships. And you want to reward them for this?" "I want to survive," Kelsani said calmly. "Look at what they did with 30 days and nothing but their own courage. Imagine what they will do with 30 years. With 300 years. The question is not whether we can destroy them. The question is whether we can afford to try." The debate raged for months. Factions formed and dissolved. Species that had been allies for millennia found themselves on opposite sides. Some demanded that the sterilization be completed regardless of cost. Others argued that humanity should be welcomed into the conclave as full members. Still others suggested a middle path: containment, isolation, careful observation. While the galaxy argued, Earth healed. The Prometheus array was rebuilt, improved, made stronger. Ships rose from factories that never stopped working. The unity that had formed in those desperate 30 days did not break when the immediate danger passed. Humanity had changed. They had seen what they could accomplish when they worked together. They had no intention of going back to the old ways. And they did something that surprised the galaxy, even more than their military victory. They reached out. Yuki Tanaka, now the most famous scientist on Earth, broadcast a message to every species that would listen. She shared her equations freely. She explained how the Prometheus array worked, holding nothing back. She offered to help any species that wanted to learn. "We did not fight for conquest," she said in that broadcast. "We did not fight for power or territory or revenge. We fought because we wanted to live. Because we believed we deserved a chance to prove what we could become. That chance is all we have ever wanted." Some species called it propaganda. Others called it a trap. But a few listened. A few sent messages back. A few began to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, the conclave had been wrong about humanity. 50 years passed. The great chamber of Axiom Prime was full again. But the mood was different now. The fear had faded, replaced by something more complicated. Respect, perhaps. Or caution. Or the beginning of understanding. At the center of the chamber stood a human woman. She was old now, her hair white, her face lined with age. But her eyes still held the same fire they had held half a century ago, when she had made the impossible possible. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka looked out at the assembled representatives of 4,000 species. She had fought for this moment. She had spent 5 decades building bridges, making alliances, proving that humanity could be trusted. And now, finally, Earth would join the conclave as a full member. "I know that many of you still fear us," she said. Her voice was strong despite her age. "You look at our history and you see violence. You look at our nature and you see chaos. You are not wrong to be cautious. We are everything you believe we are." She paused, letting her words settle. "But we are also more than that. We are beings who faced extinction and chose to fight rather than surrender. We are beings who learned in our darkest hour that our differences matter less than our common humanity. We are beings who have spent 50 years trying to prove that we can be better than our worst moments." She looked directly at Cathforan, who still served as the Silurian ambassador. He had aged too, his scales now more gray than silver. He met her gaze without flinching. "You sentenced us to death," Yuki said to him. "And in doing so, you changed us forever. You forced us to become what we were always capable of being. A united species. A people of the stars. For that, strange as it may seem, I thank you." Cathforan was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. "We underestimated you," he said. "We looked at your wars and saw only destruction. We did not see the courage, the adaptability, the absolute refusal to accept defeat." He raised his head. "I have watched your species for 50 years now. I have seen you grow and learn and reach out to others. And I have come to believe that perhaps the galaxy needs beings like you. Beings who do not know when to quit. Beings who turn their fury outward instead of inward." He stepped forward and extended one long arm. "Welcome to the conclave, Ambassador Tanaka. May your species bring light to the darkness between stars." Yuki took his hand. Around them, 4,000 species watched in silence. Later that night, Yuki stood at a window overlooking the endless void. The stars burned cold and distant, the same stars that humans had looked up at since the beginning of their existence. So much had changed. So much remained the same. A young aide approached her, a boy named Marcus, who reminded her of the captain who had died ramming his ship into the enemy flagship. "Ambassador? Are you all right?" Yuki smiled. "I was thinking about something," she said. "When they sentenced us to death, they expected us to break, to panic, to tear ourselves apart." She looked up at the stars. "They did not understand that humans have been fighting impossible odds since we first crawled out of the caves. They did not understand that telling us we cannot survive is the surest way to make us try." She turned to face the young man. "Remember this moment," she said. "Remember what we accomplished when we stood together. And remember that the universe will always underestimate us. That is our greatest weapon. The galaxy looks at us and sees a young species, aggressive and chaotic and dangerous." Her eyes gleamed with the same fire that had burned in them 50 years ago, when she had dared to tear open the sky. "Let them keep underestimating us," she said. "We have only just begun." Outside, the stars waited. The galaxy stretched out in all directions, full of wonders and dangers and possibilities beyond counting. And humanity, the species that was supposed to die, looked out at that vast darkness and smiled. They were not afraid anymore. They had nothing left to fear.